My name is Myke Hideous. I'm an artist, a photographer, and an author. In 1988, I created a rock band called The Empire Hideous, and I released several albums and performed around the country. This is a variety podcast in which Professor Z and I extract details from interesting daily headlines to offer our listeners the inevitable truth. You're listening to Finding the Truth with Myke Hideous. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Finding the Truth with Myke Hideous. I'm your host, Myke Hideous, and welcome to the show. Today is 4/20, April 20th, 2024. An interesting day for pot smokers. I wanted to let you know we're doing an interview today with a dear friend of mine who I've known for decades now. Let me just give you a little history about how I know this person. So one day in my early career doing Empire Hideous, we did our first show in New York City at the Limelight. It's a big day for me. I was very excited. There's a big major club. And I was so lucky to get the gig. And while I was there, before the show started, I'm walking down one of the corridors, and this guy approaches me and says, "Hey, man," hands me his car. He says, "Hey, man, if you ever want to do a music video, give me a call." I said, "Okay." I was a total dick to him. I was just not very polite. I just said, "Yeah, okay, thanks," and I walked away. Nevertheless, maybe a year or so went by, and I had decided I wanted to do a music video or something music related. I had just seen Perry Farrell from Jane Addiction. I had just seen his movie called Gift, which really blew me away. And then I also had, there was a music video by Danzig that had multiple videos in it, music videos with interviews. And that was the style I wanted to do. So I contact this guy. On his card, it said Spectre Productions. And his name, Mark Steiner. So I contact this guy. And we talk about this idea, and he says, "Why don't we do a full documentary, and we'll call it a mockumentary." That was the thing, a mockumentary. So, long story short, and we'll get into this as we go, but as time went by, I ended up getting a separation from my wife at the time, and Mark and I became really, really close at that point, around 1995, 94, 95. We were still close at 94, but by 95, when I got split up with my wife, Mark and I were hanging out all the time. And at that time, he was living in New York City, and I would go to visit him, and we would just, we did the craziest things. We will tell you about that in the interview. So, without further delay, I would like to introduce to you a friend of mine who was in a band called Mark Steiner and His Problems, which, by the way, is a fantastic name. I love that name, and I'm jealous that I didn't think of it first. Anyway, please welcome Mr. Mark Steiner.
Hey, Mike.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
I'm all right. Thanks, buddy. So you're in Oslo, Norway, currently, at this moment.
That's right. I've been living here now for over 20 years. I think I moved over here 6 months after 9/11. But we can get into
Was
that
it only 6 months? I thought it was less than that.
No, it was about 6 months. I think it was February to March 2002. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about Mark, and I'm not going to take up all the time here, but I got to tell the story, what happened. So on the day of 9/11, Mark was walking to go to his job. And prior to that, let me back up a little bit. Mark got married on the 8th of September. And he had his wedding reception at CBGB's Gallery. And my band, Spy Society 99, we played the reception at CBGB's Gallery. And then obviously a couple days later, 9/11 took place. And Mark, why don't you tell them what happened when you were on that day when you were walking to work?
Right. Well, yeah, I should mention that I married a Norwegian woman. on September 8th, 2001, in Central Park with the reception down at CB's gallery, as you just said. And yeah, it was somebody that I'd met, and back then it was before, I don't even know if we had Skype at that point. I mean, it was really difficult to communicate other than expensive phone calls or whatever. Anyway, I'd met this woman about maybe a year before while visiting Norway, which is where my mother's from, and I have family over here, so I speak the language, and I have 2 passports. Anyway, so I flew over a few times and visited her, and then she came over, and then we thought, well, let's just get married, because how else would we make this work, and it felt right.
I'll never forget the night you told me we were doing an event at the Mission Club. Remember we were doing what was it, Decadence? Remember that night we used to do?
Oh, right.
What the hell was it called? Decadence something?
Oh, man, things are very hazy from those days, I'll tell you.
Yeah, right. But you remember that we were doing that night. You and I were DJing, and you said to me, I have an announcement.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm like, yeah.
That's
and he's
right.
like, yeah, I'm getting married. I'm like,
you're like, don't
Jesus
get married. Christ. Don't do it. I already did it. No. Yeah, I mean,
as a matter of fact, wasn't our event on like Valentine's Day? It was like an anti-lover. Yeah,
yes,
the anti-lovers decadence ball. That's what it was.
That's exactly what it was. That was a one-off. That was a lot of fun.
And Mark tells me he's getting married that night.
That's right. Yeah, well, okay, so I got married to this woman, and we were there, and there were, I think, 80 people at the wedding, and then the gallery was packed. We had 4 bands. Spy Society 99 played, of course, along with a few other bands that I knew that I invited to play. So it was a full-on rock and roll wedding. I mean, it was really...
It was.
It was great. And I think it was weird because it was like this massive moment. And then 3 days later, I was walking to work. I'd taken off on Monday. It was Tuesday morning. And it was clear, bright blue sky. First day of autumn. It was like the air was really crisp. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. I remember walking past a politician because some local elections were coming up, and she was out promoting herself and trying to shake hands and get people to vote. And I walked past her, and I lived down the East Village at the time, and I walked past Astor Place, and I'd had my suit from when I was, got married, and also my.
You mean you were carrying it, or you were wearing it?
And the wedding dress, and I went to go drop them off at a place that was called Chris French Cleaners, just a dry cleaner. I walk in there, or actually right before I walk in, so I'm crossing Astor Place, and I hear this really strange, loud sound. I was like, "What the hell is that?" I look up, and I see a passenger plane flying really low, southbound, like just over my head. And then it disappears, and I was like, what the fuck? That was weird. And a few seconds go by. Oh, by the way, so I can use foul language, can I?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Fucking hell, great. No. So the plane disappears, and a few seconds goes by, and there's this big cloud of black smoke that just starts billowing, like from that direction. So obviously this plane had just like impacted someplace in Lower Manhattan. So I ran into the dry cleaner, and there's a guy, I think it was the owner of the place, or maybe his son, and he's like on the phone, and he's really pissed off, and he's like, damn it! He's like, you try calling 911, and you put on fucking hold, like this is typical. And I said to him, well, if you're calling about the plane that just went down, I think half the city probably saw it. And he goes,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, good point. And then he looks at me and he goes, dropping off? And I was like...
that was at the tuxedo place.
Yeah, at the dry cleaner. And I was like,
okay.
I'm dropping off. So I drop off, and he gives me a little ticket, and I go outside. And then, and I called my wife, and I was like, listen, plane went down in some place, and I don't know what's going on. and had to call her from a payphone. I didn't even have a cell phone at the time. And
Payphone.
yeah, so
You just
payphone.
made me choke.
Yeah, and I remember. I mean,
Payphone.
this is really weird because I remember. This is September 2001, and I remember standing and looking at the phone, and I'm talking to her, and somebody, and this was a weird thing at the time, but somebody had scratched in a swastika on the phone. And I was just like on the payphone. I was like, that was a really unusual thing to see in New York, especially in those days. And I was like, and then it dawned on me. I was like, oh shit, terrorism. And then, so I was like, okay, I'm going to call my boss, see if I can get out of work. It just felt weird. And she was like,
a terrible excuse, Mark.
Well, and then she was like, well, I was like, turn on the TV and check it out. She goes, yeah, she's like, the building kind of like shook. Like there was a weird little shake. And I was like, did you hear anything? She said, no. And I said, okay. So I called my boss and I spoke with the manager and he's like, Mark, we got it. We need you. You took off yesterday. We haven't seen you. We really are counting on you coming in today, even for just a couple hours. And I was like, all right, fine. So I go running up 4th Avenue, which then intersects with Union Square Park. And as I come up to Union Square Park, I see there's a crowd of about, I don't know, 100 people, all staring southbound over at University Place. So I go I kind of jog over there. And as I'm going over there, this was like right out of a New York movie, like an NYPD cop car comes cruising in, pulls up on it like pretty quickly onto the sidewalk. And the cop gets out and he's got like his cap on, he's got a mustache. And I can't hear what he's saying, but I can read his lips. And he's like, I can't fucking believe this shit. And he's looking down like with everybody else. Now it's like 150 people, like this. It's just everyone's just sort of getting together. And I get over there and I look down and we can see the Twin Towers and we can see the one tower. And it was like out of a Schwarzenegger movie or something. It was like totally Hollywood. You could see where the plane had impacted. You could see the wings. You could see the body. You could see the tail. You could even see the little wings on the tail. But it was all an imprint. It wasn't, you didn't see the plane. It was like a flaming imprint. Like Lord of the Rings, Tower of Sauron or something. And it was really bizarre. And so I'm standing there looking at this, and everyone's just like, what the hell's going on? And then all of a sudden, the other tower, there's an explosion. And there's a mushroom cloud that popped, like a big sort of a grayish, whitish mushroom cloud that kind of small that pops out of it. And people are like, what the fuck is that? And, everyone starts, people start getting really uneasy. And this guy goes, must have been a gas main or something, because we couldn't see that it was the other plane that had hit. But that's where it impacted from our angle. We couldn't see it. And I had this weird feeling. I was like, maybe I should just dive into the nearest subway station. Like, what's going on,
Right.
But so I keep going up to 21st Street. And I remember passing a gym. There were people, and everyone had stopped and they're all staring at the television. And there's footage of the two towers and in flames with, and I could see it still. So I keep going up. I finally get to work, and I get in, and the secretary's there, this girl Rosa, and I was like, Rosa, I'm sorry, I'm a little late, but the plane crashed into the towers, and she goes, Mark, where have you been? There's 2 planes have crashed into the towers.
Oh my God!
And I was like, all right, fuck this shit, I'm going home. So I turn around and I go sprinting back down to my apartment, and I'm going to tell the story because there's actually a little bit of funny sort of an aspect out of this. So I get down, I run down to, get to my apartment. I probably did it in about 10 minutes. It was normally a 25-minute walk. But I sprinted down. It was pumped full of adrenaline. Run up 6 flights of stairs. I get inside the apartment. My wife, Guru, was sitting watching the TV. And it was and we get in, and I was like, okay. And we sit and we watch for a couple minutes, and I said, all right, you know what? I said, right by now, everybody knows, or most of the city knows, and everyone's going to be trying to get out. I was like, we're not going to be able to get out.
Right.
We didn't know what was happening, except that there were two explosions, two planes had crashed in the towers.
Right.
So I said to her, all right, you know what? We're going to go to the supermarket. We're just going to get some supplies because we might have to just bunker down for like a couple of days.
So basically, your instincts kicked in to know, like,
Yeah.
I got to prepare for the worst right now.
So we go running downstairs. We go around the corner to the supermarket over on 2nd Avenue. And there's a couple of girls sitting behind the register, and there's music in there, right? So they didn't even know what was happening. And the place is pretty dead. So we go in, and we each grab a basket. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go this way. You go that way. You just grab stuff that makes sense that we can have, for the next few days. So we go, and I was like, meet me back here in about 5-10 minutes tops. So we meet up, and by that time, the place is mobbed. Like within those 10 minutes, the place, there's like over 100 people in there. And people are screaming and yelling at each other and being dude, you took the last Campbell's soup, that I was going to take, people are just like freaking out, grabbing toilet paper, all kinds of
panic.
Stuff. So we're like, but we're first to the register at this point.
Right.
And these girls are like, what's going on? I said, you're not going to want to be around. I said, the Twin Towers on fire. Like there's some planes have crashed. Well, what do you mean?
Now, Mark,
what's with the music? And they're
where was this? Was this by your house?
Yeah,
this bodega?
On 2nd Avenue and 6th Street. It's a place called Met Food that no longer exists. It was like a dumpy supermarket. So, but we had like stuff, and we had, I managed to grab a 6-pack of beer and everything. And then we went up to the street, and we're about to go. We went around the corner, and we're about to go upstairs. And at the time, I had quit smoking for about 2.5 years. But my wife was a smoker, or like party smoker. She wasn't a heavy smoker. But she looks and she goes, and she says, "Fam," which means damn or whatever in Norwegian curse.
How do you say it?
Fam, which actually means the devil. It's a Norwegian old. Norway's was a Lutheran country for many years, and it's not at all now. But anyway, so the curse words are very religious, and so she says "fam," and I was like, "What's the matter?" And she said, "I forgot to buy cigarettes." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "I forgot I was going to buy a pack of cigarettes." And I look at her and I say, "You're not buying a pack of cigarettes." And she looks at me like she could kill me, like daggers coming out of her eyes, right? Like, what do you mean? I'm not
buying a carton.
And I said, because we're buying a carton. We went around the corner and we bought it. We went to the liquor store, and I grabbed a bottle of whiskey and a carton of smokes.
You need that.
And we went upstairs and we sat down, and then we just watched, and then the rest is kind of history. We didn't get out. We ended up leaving the city, I think, a couple of days later. I mean, the phones were shut down. It was, it was crazy. Her family was living over there. They couldn't get through. And I finally had a friend of mine get through miraculously. So I had him call my family and her family, so that just let them know that we were okay. And then you called, of all people. You're one of the few people that got through. And
right,
so
oddly.
Weird. So
because I'll tell you what happened, folks. When I was seeing what's happening, the first thing that came to my mind was, how's my friend Mark? Because Mark was like the only person I knew that was a personal friend of mine who lived in New York. So I immediately went into panic mode, wondering whether or not he was okay. So I tried reaching him. And mind you, the phones were all screwed up for everybody, especially in the city. But at some point, I get a call. You called me back, I believe it was, right?
Yeah, well, no, I couldn't dial out. They shut the...
I called you then?
You called me. We couldn't dial out. I could only call locally within the 212 area. I had a landline phone. So we couldn't call out. We couldn't even call New Jersey. But you called me. You managed to get through. And you were one of like 3 people I think who managed to get through. Another one was this girl that I was friends with, like a pen pal from Maximum Rock and Roll. Like this Chinese girl who lived in Singapore. It was the weirdest thing. I'd never spoken with her. And she calls up and she's like, "Mark, it's Nikki." And I was like, "What?"
Who?
Because I was
Who are you?
She was from Singapore. I was like, She goes, "You okay?" And I was like, "What?" It
Wow.
was
Yeah, everybody was so
so weird.
concerned about anybody that was in New York. We immediately, were concerned. Now, let me just give people a little bit of background here, and I don't mean to cut you off, Mark.
No, it's
Hold
all
that
right.
thought. But Mark and I, prior to 9/11, Mark and I had this fascination with Nostradamus. And we would constantly talk about these so called predictions that Nostradamus made and wrote about. And you can even see it in the film that Mark made for from myself and Empire Hideous. I think there's a quote. Mark did one of our first music videos called "Power the Empire," and at the end of the video, the movie music video, there's a quote. I think it was that. Maybe it was Parasite's Bible. I can't remember. One of the others, but there's a quote from Nostradamus at the end of the music video. In fact, in Power the Empire, the music video, you can see the Twin Towers
Yep.
in the background.
Yeah, we shot.
And Mark and I would always talk about the day when it comes that New York would be attacked. And we thought maybe a nuclear bomb. We thought, and based on the readings of Nostradamus, the mad dog of the Middle East, which was somebody from the Middle Eastern countries. Nobody knew who. We all thought it was Saddam Hussein, but it turned out to be somebody else. In any event, that was what Mark and I would talk about. The day when the apocalypse comes to New York City and or America itself. And sure enough, Mark was there to witness it. So
Yeah,
to
I mean
speak.
that's a real. I actually forgot about that until you mentioned it.
Mhm.
Although I did sort of write a story. It's a chapter of my book that I'm working on. I've been working on for a long time. But it was actually that was published in some years ago by a guy in Czech Republic, part of an anthology. Um, yeah, no, that was weird because I remember I had one friend come over because he was living over in Avenue D, and this guy Eric, and I was like, Eric, you're living in a neighborhood that's really like there'd been riots there before in the past, and um, he was like it was still wasn't a gentrified neighborhood. He was so he was like this like white guy student living in this very Latino and black neighborhood, and yeah,
Is that the
it was
guy who used
fun.
to live upstairs from you
No,
that we used
no,
to buy pot from?
no, no. Oh, speaking of 420, no, that was my neighbor across the hall.
Oh, yeah,
No,
yeah.
no,
He used to get the
no.
greatest pot.
Yeah, no, that's
That pot was so good, we used to call it heroin pot.
oh man, yeah. That's. I mean, there's so many stories from living in that
Mm.
apartment over there.
The interesting thing about this whole story that Mark just told you about is that both he and I wrote about it. In fact, I wrote about it in my book,
Yeah,
King of an Empire to the Shoes of a Misfit, which, by the way, is still available on my website, mykehideous.com. But there's a section that I actually dedicated, a chapter that I dedicated to this very event that took place. And Mark wrote about it for his publication, and I wrote about it for mine. And I, to this day, every time I read that section, if I'm going through my book or working on it, I read that section and it always brings chills to my spine.
yeah. The creep. It is creepy that for whatever reason decide to quote Nostradamus in our little mockumentary to build an empire that we'd done a few years before. And then the music video, of course, with for Power of the Empire, with the footage that was shot in 16 millimeter film, and we shot that part of it on my roof. I mean,
Yep,
I
breaking
love
the
that. That's
TVs.
actually one of the things when it comes to film production. One of my proudest moments was making that video. We did it on a
Wow.
shoestring budget, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was like milked every single frame that I could from that camera. Like
Mm,
and there's superpositions and stuff. Anyway, it's a cool video. You should check it out. It's on YouTube. Um,
yeah.
and but there was the yes, one thing I forgot. My friend Eric he came over, and we're looking out the window, and I'm looking, and I can see like you can see sort of the skies kind of glowing where the towers had been, because by this time they'd fallen. I mean, we had to like,
So
we had to.
this is you're talking about at night, right?
Yeah, that night, like, and so my friend Eric comes over, and I say to him, I said, "Isn't that?" I said, "It's so weird." I said, looking over there, and like, there's this big star hanging above, and he goes, Eric goes, "Oh, that's he was an expert on astronomy," and he goes, "Oh, that's not a
Mars.
star. That's a planet. That's Mars." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh shit!" And I went and I grabbed that copy of my copy of Nostradamus, and I pulled up the quote, that one quatrain where he talks about the blood of Arathushra, I think, Arathuthra, or whatever, something that is a reference to Mars, like the Roman name of Mars, the god of war. And there was also in that same quatrain, there's a little thing about uh, like two mountains or two, like it was just, it's really, I can't remember it right now. It was really creepy. And that's, yeah. And of course,
If I remember correctly, I think it had to. It said uh, the two towers will fall in the new, what are they called? The new
the new
land,
city,
the new world, the new
the new
city.
city. Yeah.
So that was always our thing that Mark and I would talk about. This particular quatrain from Nostradamus that it's very mysterious. Like no one knows for sure, but you read it and it kind of makes sense. Like
Yeah,
the
it
new
was really, it was
millennium.
really, I mean, I don't know.
It was
That was,
bizarre.
I was really creeped out at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So not surprising that my wife and I then packed up and moved to Oslo, Norway 6 months later.
Yeah.
So that was
And
kind
I
of,
lost my best friend.
well, we still talk. We
No,
still hang
you know what I
out.
mean. You know what I mean. Like we used to hang out all the time, and then once you were gone, it like life changed a little bit for me as well
Well,
as it
it
did for
changed,
you.
but it changed for so many people, because even within the next few years, it seemed like everybody started leaving. I mean, I know so many people that left, a ton of people that went down to New Orleans, and then the hurricane Katrina hit there.
Oh boy.
So it was just like, it was one disaster after another. Really,
Right.
insane.
So I want to mention two things before we take a break. I'm going to start by saying one thing. One thing Mark used to do before him and I met. Well, actually, when we first started hanging out with each other, he was involved in uh, video production, so to speak, shooting music videos. And he did work. Oh my God, how many people did you? How many videos did you work on? Overkill. Help me out here. Motorhead. Um,
Yeah, I mean, just to make it clear, I worked on all different levels. So I mean, everything from,
right, but I'm still.
yeah,
You worked with these videos that you did. These
yeah, it was like
musicians.
all kinds of celebrities and weird. I mean, there's a whole
Yeah.
bunch of crazy stories there.
David Byrne, right? David Byrne. Who else? Yeah,
No,
name a
not
couple.
David Byrne.
Not David Byrne.
No, that would be
Motorhead,
that would have been
Overkill.
cool. Yeah, in terms of like the cool bands, I actually edited a Motorhead video that ended up
Mm,
on Beavis and Butthead as well. That was
no
great.
kidding.
'Cause, yeah, they were so. There's an episode of Beavis and Butthead where they're like rocking out to the song is called Burner, um, directed by my friend Jefferson Spady. So I was assisting him, and we edited that. We spent 3 nights editing that video, and
Mm.
I ran into Lemmy about 6 months later, over at Coney Island High, and we got really drunk together, because I was like,
Which,
I'm
by
going to
the
walk.
way, people, that was a club. Coney Island High was a club in New York City on St. Mark's Place.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't mean to, we were going to break, but just really quickly, went in there. I saw Lemmy sitting at the bar, and I thought, you know what? I said, I don't know him, but I feel like I do, because I sat and I watched his face for like 3 nights in a row. Got like very little sleep. So I walk over to him and I order a drink, and then I said to him, I said, hey, I said, I don't mean to bother you, but I'm a friend of Jefferson Spady's. The director who did Burner, and he
I remember him.
and he goes, oh, Jefferson, how is he? And so I So he invites me to sit down, and I sat there, and we just sat and drank and drank and drank. And by the end of the night, I mean, there were some other things that happened. Another friend of mine was there as well. Got into an argument with him. It was some crazy stuff. And then, but by at one point, like this guy taps me on the shoulder, and I turn my head, and like the place is empty. There's one guy sweeping the floor, me and Lemmy at the bar. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning. So we go walking out like arm in arm, like, get out into the street. Gives me a big hug, and that was the first and last time I ever like met Lemmy in person. So,
Wow.
yeah.
We're going to take a break real quick. And when we come back, we will continue speaking with Mark Steiner, my guest and friend from Norway. And we will talk about his music videos, his latest album, and so forth. So stick around. Finding the Truth with me, your host, Myke Hideous, and my guest, Mark Steiner, from his band or his band, Mark Steiner and His Problems, which great name. So let me start out by saying the following: trauma, addiction, heartache, depression, recovery, and sobriety. These words come from Mark Steiner and are a perfect definition of what he and I have dealt with for many, many years since we first knew each other. Um, and what Mark has done with his music has incorporated a lot of those emotions, those feelings that people go through in his music. So I highly recommend that if you are looking for a passionate style of music, look into Mark Steiner and His Problems. In the meantime, let's continue our interview with Mr. Steiner. And Mark, why don't you start by telling us, in a nutshell, but basically, because I do want to get to the music itself, but why don't you start telling us what made you get into music, how long you've been doing it, and what made you get into it?
Okay, well, that's in a nutshell. All right, so music was always there as a kid, like piano lessons as a young child. Studied violin or played violin in grammar school for like
Oh, I didn't
7
know that.
years. Yeah, but I put it when I turned 14. I managed to convince my mother to give me to get me so I could get guitar lessons, private
Mm.
instructor. And I like at that point I just put the violin down. I'd barely been playing. Like I played first violin in the school orchestra, but I left my violin in the locker at school. So my mother was always amazed that I was even like still in orchestra because she never saw me practice because I didn't practice. I just practiced twice a week with the orchestra somehow.
Right.
But anyway, so but then it was I was just like it wasn't I don't know felt it wasn't my thing. And then I picked up a
Sure.
guitar. Um, got interested in electric guitar. Uh, started my first band senior year of high school with a couple of guys. Actually, we were bigger. We were like but it was a high school battle of bands situation. Um, and we did just a couple gigs. We played the Rat Trap Cafe in Paladin.
The Rat Trap Cafe in
Yep.
Prospect Park, New Jersey.
Yeah, we played there a
Yes.
couple of times. We played with the Fiends
Oh my
and
God,
with
they're playing
Snag.
again now too. Who? And
I
Snag.
know. There's still like it's crazy. All
You
these
played with
years.
Snag.
Yeah, yeah, we did
I
it.
just I
A
just
Sunday
ran
night.
into the I just ran into the singer from Snag. What the fuck was his name? I can't remember. Um, uh, like around Christmas time, I saw him for the first
That's
time
funny.
in like 35 years. Wow! Oh my
Well,
God, the Rat
that's the
Trap
last
Cafe. That
time.
was. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's 1988.
Yep, that was the first
Yeah,
place I started going to see punk bands play.
yeah, we were like a goth punk band. So we were doing originally doing all covers, and then by the time we played there, which was on a Sunday, we had
Well,
two original.
wait. What was the name of the band you were in?
It was a terrible name. It was called Unified Division.
You know,
You know?
it's there. Now that I think about it, there must have been a night because I used to go see the Fiends all the time play there. There had to be a night when you were doing that gig with them that I've seen you, and that name almost rings a bell. I didn't even realize this until right now. There's a
Yeah,
possibility that I saw you play opening up for the Fiends at the Rat Trap Cafe in Prospect Park, New Jersey, or was it Halden? Prospect
It
Park,
was
right?
Paladin or Halden.
Halden,
What is
right? Halden.
Halden? Okay, I never
So
really.
yeah, wow, what a
Yeah.
small world. Go on, I'm sorry I interrupted
Oh
you.
yeah. No, but that was like the first time we like played real venue. But uh yeah. After that, like ended up going to college. Like we the band just we kind of split up. It was like high school ended, and I went to college, and I kept doing some once in a while, like once in a blue moon, I would do like a solo thing at a cafe or whatever at where I was going to college in upstate New York. So it was nothing, it was just something I would do on the side. And I took some music classes and whatever, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved music and film and language and literature. And then I decided to study film, not to become like a Hollywood director, but to study avant-garde filmmaking. And that's how we ended up meeting, because when I finished doing film, like studying film, and I was going to see bands in New York already. I've been going to bands like the CBs since '86, and the Ritz and whatever. And then it was the early '90s, and I remember going. I think I saw a flyer first, and I went to see the Empire Hideous, who I didn't know, but it was
Where was this?
over the Limelight, right? I mean, that was the first time I saw you play. First time that we met, when you said that. I don't remember you being an asshole to me, but I did have this. I think it was '93 or '94, that around that time. And I remember
I believe it was. Yeah, I believe it was '93.
Yeah, because I know there were. I think I saw you twice. I saw you play there twice, and once was with the New Creatures.
Right.
Which,
That was when
right,
you mean when I did this special appearance with them?
yes, and that was the
Yeah.
yeah. So that was the second time that we met.
Okay, so now that I think about it, technically speaking, the first time we met was '92, because I still have the flyer. '92,
Okay.
and then '93 was when I did the gig. No, wait. No, that was '90. No, that was '93. You're right. Yeah, it was
Find the
'93.
flyers, flash them up on the screen.
Yeah, I have them. I know I do. I know I do.
I have them someplace too, but yeah. But it's really funny because actually Susan Mitchell was playing violin with them at the time, and I didn't know who she was, and I was like
With the New
blown away
Creatures.
and I met her like 6 months later. She was working in some cafe down the East Village, and I got her phone number, and then we started playing music together. We're still friends to this day. So yeah, a lot of stuff happened around that scene, like that whole downtown, like the so-called gothic scene, and everything that was happening around then, like early mid '90s.
Mm.
And yeah, that was a good time. I mean, the thing is, one thing that struck me was when I saw Empire Hideous, I was like, that guy is doing what I want to be doing. Because at the time, like from the late '80s into the early '90s, I mean, I was listening to a lot of different music, all of it dark. But I kind of secretly wanted to do some kind, like I loved the Nephilim, and I loved like the Sisters and related stuff, and I wanted to do something that was like a little bit more goth, but also a bit punk. And then I saw you guys play, and I was just like, oh man, well, this guy's already doing it. So that's why I hit you up and said, well, maybe we can do it. I kind of figured this would just be like, because I was not comfortable with throwing myself out into the so-called limelight, even though we were at the limelight. And so I was kind
of. You mean figuratively speaking?
Yeah, music was on the back burner for me. I mean, it was kind of
because you were doing film, you were doing very well in that business. You were doing everything from editing to shooting and whatever when you were working with that production company. So, but you had this need to get into music.
And then in '97, I put an ad in the Village Voice because I thought, you know what, I actually want to start a band. Like I just was seeing so many cool bands around. The scene that we were in, and then there was a whole downtown thing going on with bands like Chrome Cranks, and Kid Congo Powers was playing, and who else? I mean, there was just a ton of bands that were like, it was a really interesting time in New York City. And again, now we're in the mid to late '90s. So right. I was really into the. I was also really interested in New York City history. And there was a book called The Gangs of New York, which was also made into a film, not a very good film, but with some interesting sequences. There was also a book by Luc Sante called Low Life, which was also made it. Actually, I think I read that first. That was the one that made a big impact on me. So I started. I wanted to start a band that kind of had this element of sort of 19th century New York gangland decadence in it. And I put an ad out, and I met this guitar player, this guy Phil the Tremolo King, a Belgian guy, and we met up and we started playing music together. And then we went through a bunch of.
I still have his CD.
Yeah, we put out an EP, and it was self-released. We did an EP, and then we did a
No, I
live
mean,
version.
I still have Phil Tremolo's CD.
Oh, you do?
The
Yeah,
Tremolo King. Yeah.
he's still active. I think he's living down. I mean, we had a bit of a falling out at one point, but
Hmm.
that was after I left for Europe, and I don't need to get into that. He's a good guy. He's a great musician. He's living in New
Yeah.
Orleans, and we've sort of reconnected on Facebook, and it's nice. I mean,
Good.
I don't love to see him again. I doubt that we would
Good.
probably ever do another. At this point, I think the last time I did a Piker Ryan gig
Now, wait a minute.
was.
Before you even go further, let's explain to everybody what you're talking about, because we kind of
Oh,
jumped
right.
the subject. So Mark was talking about how he read this book. What was it? Low Life?
Right.
No, Gangs of New York.
Yeah, it was the
Right.
Low Life.
So
Which
before you get into
Low
Piker
Life.
Ryan's Folly, explain to them how you got that name. Okay. So
Okay,
go ahead.
so Low Life was actually inspired by the book Low Life by Luc Sante was heavily inspired by Herbert Asbury's The Gangs of New York. And they both talk about, there was one little section where there's a price list described as a takeout menu. And it was found in the pocket of a downtown criminal. And it was a list of services rendered. Punching, $2. Both eyes blacked, $4. Nose and jaw broke, $10. Jacked out, $15. Leg or arm broke, $19. Shot in leg or stab, $25. Doing the big job, $100 and up. So this was his like little calling card. I don't think he had them stacked in his pocket. He had one piece of paper that he would show to people. And this guy's name was Piker Ryan. And I thought, oh my God, what a fucking badass, you know? Like, there was something about the fact that there was this disconnect in time. New York City was a totally different city. It was very violent. And the fire departments the local fire departments were they were all basically,
Thieves.
you know, well, they were basically different. They were gangs because you
Yeah.
had like different neighborhoods. You had like Germans bordering on Irish,
Yep.
and they didn't like each other. And so if they would show up at a fire, to put it, if both of their companies would show up, they instead of putting the fire out, they get into a fight.
Get into a fight, right?
They get into a fight.
Yeah,
It gets burned,
like
and then
Mike said before, they did make a movie out of the book Gangs of New York, which I like. I thought it was great. But yeah, so all this history he's telling you about is how he eventually ends up getting the name for the band. Go on.
Right, exactly. Because I mean, had a real hankering for. I mean, I loved drinking. Started drinking when I was like a teenager, and you know, and it was just, and for me, it was a way of like, well, I would just get more motivation and do things and approach people and talk to people, which I probably wouldn't have done if I was sober, because I didn't have very high self-esteem, is what I realize now. So what I did was, you know, that's kind of, I think probably when I met you, I'd probably thrown back a few drinks at least, maybe even had a bit of a spliff. I don't remember.
A few.
Yeah. So,
I could
you know,
tell
but
you
that's the
some
thing.
stories about you.
Yeah, we would go out and I would drink and you would smoke and we would get into these crazy conversations with people. I remember we talked our way into the. I mean, now I'm going a little off the subject, but you know, our own New York City history.
Oh yeah,
Like
hold that, because we are going to talk about that. We are going to talk about that in the next segment. But for now,
music.
I don't want to cut you off, but for now, let's talk about. All right. So Piker Ryan becomes a band. That becomes the name of the band, and it becomes Piker Ryan's Folly.
Right.
right?
Because
Okay, that was
it seemed a little, the name Pike Orion was obscure enough, and it was kind of like, well, and then, I don't know, I think Phil and I came up with the name, like we made it Pike Orion's Folly, um, which was basically the fact that he got arrested by the cops. It was a bit of a stupid thing because he got busted with this price list in his pocket, you know.
mm-hmm.
So yeah,
So all
so
right,
we
so now
started
so
doing the
the
shows.
the band becomes official,
Yeah.
and so take us from there. You start playing gigs and in New York,
Well,
and
yeah, we did a gig at Alchemy at CBGB's Gallery,
mm-hmm,
which was run by Althea and DJ Jason at the time.
mm-hmm.
I was a regular hanging out there for a
Yeah, you
few
lived right around the
years.
corner.
Yeah, I lived a few blocks away, so it was like CB's was one of my homes away from home. I mean, I never worked there, but I did um, I did a bunch of gigs, mainly in the gallery, a few times in the main club, also in the basement,
Mm.
and I even got to be friends with Hilly Crystal, which was a whole other weird thing. But yeah, I mean that place was that's kind of like it was a sort of a safe place to be able to just book a gig. So first time Phil and I played there was as a duo. I mean, I think we even had a backing track on a super VHS tape, which the player I think I gave to you. I think the SVHS player I gave to you when I moved to Norway a few years later.
No. I
But
got the 8 millimeter cassette rewinder, not the player.
no, okay, I don't know what happened to that super VHS player.
Yeah, I didn't
So
take it. I didn't have super VHS capabilities. But
right,
anyway, that's a whole
well,
other.
right, but yeah. So I mean, we were playing around, and we went through a bunch of different rhythm sections. I remember one time uh, out at the place called the Charleston out in Brooklyn.
Mm.
We played, which was like a pizza place where you played on the floor, and there's a piece of tape on the floor, like delineating the stage from the audience. And there were like four people in the audience, and this one guy, like we were a pretty raucous band. It was like we had this song called "Paper God," which was it was a very Dead Kennedys inspired tune. And it was,
Mm.
with that kind of energy, and it was really aggressive. And I used to drink a lot on stage. Like I start drinking before I got on stage, and I was just a vocalist. So I'd
Mm.
write the lyrics and co-write the music with Phil, but I didn't play guitar or anything. I would just get up there and bellow and drink, and
Mm.
I mean, I was like really inspired by like Chrome Cranks and Birthday Party and like bands that just had this like energy. Um, and yeah, no, so we're doing this gig, and there's like four people in the audience, and suddenly this one guy who's like a friend of the drummers, he just gets up and he like runs at me and like throws himself at me. Like I see him coming at me, and I grab onto this microphone stand, and like I'm falling back into the drum set, the drum kit. And this guy, like, just I don't know, it was really weird. Like he just had it out for me for some reason, or he was just drunk or whatever. And I remember, like, I managed to change my momentum, and I like threw myself forward and grabbed him by the like his shirt, and I threw him as hard as I could, and he went flying back into the room, and his back like smacked into this table, and he
Ooh.
fell down on the floor. And the owner of the bar and his son, like who they were bartending, came running around from the bar, grabbed the guy, dragged him out the front door, and threw him out. And the band just kept playing, and we finished the song, and then we kept doing the set. It was
That's
just like,
classic. I remember you telling me that story. I wasn't at the gig for that show, but I
like
remember you telling me that story.
Warning: if you find the content of this program to be offensive, the speakers will not be held responsible if you decide to throw yourself into an active volcano. Hey folks, thanks for listening to Finding the Truth with Myke Hideous. Listen, don't forget to check out all my Hideous merchandise, including t-shirts, blankets, hoodies, CDs, and my book, King of an Empire to the Shoes of a Misfit. It's all available only at MykeHideous.com. And don't forget, that's Myke with a Y, M-Y-K-E, MykeHideous.com.
Right. So on that note, talking about the band Piker Ryan's Folly, I wanted to show everybody this, which is Mark's first
funny
cassette. All right, Piker Ryan's Folly. That was the first band he did. It was, I don't know if you duped these yourself or not, whatever, but all the songs he was just talking about are primarily on this cassette. And I used to listen to this tape all the time in my car. And that's his first cassette, which I still own to this day. I don't know if it's coming in clear or not.
That was, I forgot
there you go.
That was before the EP.
Yep.
That's like
that was before the EP.
Home recordings. I mean, that was like a demo cassette.
Mm-hmm. Did you dupe that yourself, or did you have them? Duped?
I think I had them cloned by a guy down on Avenue A. He did the CDs, and I think he might have done the cassettes initially as well.
Right. I have the CD up here somewhere on my shelf with my other music, but I can't find it now. The tape, I knew where the tape was.
Yeah. Well, there's Low Life, which was the CD, and then there's Bowery Blues, which was the live at CBGB. That was two different gigs that we combined into one, and that was mastered out at Big Blue Meanie out in New Jersey. So
I remember that. Yeah. Jason, right? Jason and
Jason.
By the way, Tim died, right?
Yeah, I know.
The guy, the owner of Big Blue. Yeah, he died a couple years ago. All right. So anyway, so let's fast forward now to the present. Okay. So you've got Mark's current band is called Mark Steiner and His Problems. And the new album, which is out, is called Black Hole. And where can they get this, Mark? We're gonna put all the information up. There you go, on the T-shirt. We're gonna put all the information up for everybody. The website, and we'll show the cover of the album and where to get it. But in the meantime, tell us where people can get your music. Right.
Well, should I tell anything about the music itself, or say anything about that?
Yeah. Tell us whatever you want. I wanted to get to where you are now so that we can promote everything that you're currently doing.
Quick little summary. We talked about 9/11 in another segment, so I moved to Norway, and at that point I really needed to play guitar as well. So I actually had a band called Kandera as well in New York for a while with my friend Eric Walter. But that's when I started playing guitar and singing at the same time, and drinking less. And then I started doing solo stuff. And by 2006, I kept trying to pull a band together. It was just hard to do. I had like a band called Debauchery, like Mark Steiner and the Debauchery. I had Mark Steiner and Fallen Birds. I had these different, I would basically travel around Europe kind of like a blues musician, but I would not play blues. I would have these originals, maybe a few covers that I would send to people who I'd met on MySpace, and we would go and I'd go and meet them. We would do like a rehearsal, and then we would do a gig. So I had like a band in Paris that I worked with for a few years. We put out actually my first solo EP, Mark Steiner, Fallen Birds, and then we did an LP called Broken back in 2000.
For those of you who have been watching this show for a long time, you can always see the poster of Mark that I have on the back. I don't know if you can see it. Turn a little bit.
Yeah, that's
in the background there.
That lunatic.
Yeah, people are like, who's that guy with the messed up face on that poster? That's Mark. Anyway, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
That was I mean, like things started happening around. So by around 2000, 2006, I did a solo tour of Portugal, and then things just started happening. I was traveling all around Europe because it was so easy. It was great. That was one great thing about living in Norway was um, I was able to, like, I had a day job, but I could go for the weekend. I could fly down to like Berlin, or I could go to Paris
Mm.
and meet up with some people, and we would do like a little tiny little club gig or something, or a cafe. I mean, it was nothing spectacular in that sense, but it was a lot of fun. So I had
Mhm.
all these different bands around, and then I ended up going to Australia, and I've been there 5 times over the years. Which is, I mean, just I never would have if I hadn't left New York, that wouldn't have, never have happened. So in a
Really?
bizarre way, even though 9/11 was very traumatic, it was also the real catalyst for launching my music career
Mm.
as a solo artist and with a band. And at one point, it was right after I'd released Broken. Um, this friend of mine I was hanging out at his apartment, and he was like playing me this record of some guy from the '60s, Alan something and His Problems. I can't remember the guy's name. And he was like, "You should call yourself Mark Steiner and His Problems." And I was like, "That's
Great
perfect."
name. It's
You know, because
perfect. I
it's
love that name.
dark, and it usually gets like, it evokes a snicker. People go, "What?" Like, that's kind of a fucked up name.
It's a great name. I love it.
You know, and so it kind of sums everything up because um, I do dark music, but I also, there's always something. There's always a little bit of a sense of humor in everything that I
Right.
do. It might be very subtle, but that's the way that I operate. So I put
If
out,
anybody if,
records.
if
Yeah,
anybody out there is into a band like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, or even Nick Cave's solo career, you could find a similarity with Mark Steiner and His Problems music. So you might, if you're a fan of Nick Cave, you would probably more than likely enjoy the music by Mark Steiner.
yeah. I mean, I've, I've gotten that comparison over the years a lot, and that's, we're definitely in the same neighborhood. Um, Although,
You've even worked with a musician who played for Nick Cave, I believe.
yeah, I've worked with plenty of musicians in Cave's band. I mean, I don't know
Isn't that
Cave.
so strange? And yet you've never met Nick, have you?
No, I have met Nick. I have met Nick Cave
Okay,
a few times. I even have some stories about that.
nice. That's amazing. I
So
didn't realize that you met him, but I know you worked with a
yeah,
couple of musicians, at least one that I knew of that was with Nick Cave.
yeah. Well, I mean, that was basically through Jim Sclavunos, from who plays with the Bad Seeds. He was living in New York when we were hanging out in the '90s, and I got to know him. I mean, Jim's got a he's got a real history. He comes from the whole no wave scene, bands like Eight Eyed Spy, and, like, worked with like Lydia Lunch, and he ended up playing with the Bad Seeds, and I got to know him, and he's the one that actually told me. He's like, I think it was after I moved to Norway, and he's like, Mark, maybe you should. Why don't you just work under your name instead of like
Mm.
this Piker Ryan name? Like, just be Mark Steiner. And I was like, okay. And then I met this guy who's like, oh, what about being Mark Steiner's Problems? And I was like, yeah, that's perfect. So that the cycle really took off then, and because people get curious and they're like, what's this? Because I could do a solo gig with me and my problems, which the songs could be my problems, or I could do it as a duo, or I could do it with I mean, I'd have like sometimes this 6 or even 7 piece band. It was
Me
crazy,
and my
but
problems.
yeah, and I was drinking less because I knew I couldn't play guitar and sing and perform, like, but yeah, I mean, just to kind of bring back things back up to speed. So, did a record in 2014 called Saudade, which is a Portuguese word. Been to Portugal a bunch of times, and it's an album. The title, it's a Portuguese word that describes the feeling. It's that when you lose something or somebody that means a lot to you, and there's a overwhelming feeling of sorrow, grief. But there's also, like, when you think about that person or that place, there's a kind of a good feeling, so it kind of makes you feel good at the same time.
Hmm.
That's Saudade. That Saudade does not exist in English or most languages. So I just thought it was such a beautiful title, so I titled the record that, and that was 2014. So that's 10 years ago. So it's, and then between then and now, started, with a new band here in Oslo with, got Ted Parsons, who's the former drummer of the band Prawn. He was in that band. That was like his band with a couple other guys. And then, and he lives here in Oslo. So we've known each other for a bunch of years. Started jamming with this guy, Leon Moralia, who's like a British Italian bass player and music producer. So it's the three of us. And then I met this guy who's a bartender at the time, this guy Romek, and turned out to be a great guitar player. And so the four of us started playing music together. And then we released a couple of singles back in 2018, 19, and 2020, early 2020. And including, well, actually, all those songs are on the new record. We remixed them. There's a song called Insomnia, which has a music video. And then there's a couple of animated music videos for The Fuck Up and Love, Hate, Love. And then,
So if I may interrupt you for a moment, what I wanted to say is I have seen the videos, and I gotta say my favorite video that I've watched of Mark Steiner His Problems is "Hang On, Twin Flames." I found that to be a wonderfully entertaining video. And it's, believe it or not, it is sort of an idea that I had wanted to do years ago. But I highly recommend anybody out there to, if you want to check out a really decent video with very, and all of this is done on basically very little budget, but any budget at all, right? I mean,
well, it did cost money. I decided, I hired in a friend of mine, this guy Jean De Oliveira, who's a Portuguese guy. He used to live in Berlin. He did the video for Insomnia, which is basically, that was on a shoestring budget. But yeah, I still paid for it, and it was video, but he did a bang up job with that. And then he really wanted to do a video like after COVID, and it was like, took a while. And finally I convinced my band, I was like, we got to put the record out. I couldn't find a label, but I was like, well, if we put a single out, maybe we'll find a label. So we agreed to put out Hang On, Twin Flames. Twin Flames is the name in parentheses. And the reason for that I'll get into in a minute, but there's a few versions of that song out there which are totally different. So Hang On is the band version. That's the full band version, which is, I guess, like a post-rock version, and that's like the band, and the record is very reflective of that style. The video we shot over the course of about 4 days, and just in my locations that I had locally. So I have an art gallery. So we used that as a studio, and then we did some exteriors, and yeah, it was a great. I mean, I didn't want to hold back on it, so I thought, instead of like asking people for favors, I'm going to hire this guy Jean. So I flew him in. He lives in France. I flew him in. He gave us a deal, but it still costs a lot. Like I'm not actually at liberty to say how much it costs, but it costs a lot of money. But it was worth it because it was just a great great video, and I appreciate your.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought it was a great, well produced and acted out per se. And yeah, I just really, really, really dig it. On that note, let's talk about the new album and get that covered. Black Hole, the new album's out. And again, they can get it through your website. I'm assuming through Spotify if they want to download it, iTunes.
Yeah, it's. I ended up putting the record out through my own label, which is called Rabin Records. Rabin, or Rabin in Norwegian, it's a barren place. That's what the name means. Which happens to be also the name of my family cabin. Which is it's a very rocky property there's not a lot of room for, there's vegetation, but there's not a lot of room for, like, there's no lawn.
What's
And
that?
so that's the name of the label, is Robin Records. So I've been putting stuff out there, and this was the 12th, the 11th and 12th release. We did a CD release back in January. There'll be a vinyl version of it coming in September, I think. Waiting for the pressings to arrive. I mean, it's going to take a few months. So, but we're going to wait until after the summer, and we'll do an autumn release and probably do a full band release gig with a live concert. And I don't know about touring with them is very difficult. They're great guys, and but we're all up there, and everyone's got responsibilities, and it costs money to tour, you know.
Sure.
So I do it, and when I can, I do it with I have a sort of side parallel project with violin player Pavel Single, who's I've been working with for years. So he's on a few of the songs on the record, and he's on the last record, and he's a good partner in crime. And then also with Ingun Holman, who you met. She's the one who I work with most of all. So we have a sort of a dark wave project that we're doing on the side as well. And what we're doing is a lot of the songs are the same songs as you'll find on the record, but they're just completely different interpretations, which can be very confusing for people. But, because they think they're going to go see Mark Steiner His Problems, and then it doesn't sound like it does on the record because it's a totally different bunch of musicians, or maybe even stripped down.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. You're working with musicians now, but on a personal conversation that you have had, you and I have had in the past, you had mentioned to me that you had considered at this point packing it in. Like, are you over with music? Are you done with it? Like, what's your next move?
I mean, not pack. No, that's no. Then you misunderstood. I'll never pack it in. I'm just. The idea of doing like a band, like, as you know, I was hoping that this album would really take off. I'm still hoping it'll take off. I'm going to do the. And again, the problem is it's budgets. The venues these days all around, it's hard to get money in terms of getting paid, and it costs to rehearse. It costs to travel. The guys in my band, they're all they have other things as well. I mean, we're all up. We're not kids anymore. Two of them have children of their own. One has small children. The other has children.
So basically, everybody's got their responsibilities.
Yeah, everyone's got responsibilities, and that's just So the idea of us, the 4 or 5 of us, I should say, because Ingun is also a big part of that. To do I don't know. The gigs are very few and far between. I would love to do it. Get them over to New York. I would love to do a few gigs over there at some point. But the reality is I don't know. I guess what I was saying is that I've kind of resolved. I mean, I'm 54, and I'm fine with that. I'm in better shape than I've been. I stopped drinking 3 years ago. And
you're sober now, and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
How long has it been now?
Been 3 years.
Good for you. Congratulations, Mark.
Thank you. That's kind of what the record sort of is a reflection on, because a lot of those lyrics came in after I sobered up. Not all the songs. Some of them were from before, but basically the album. I like the idea of putting out an album. I think an LP, an album should tell a story, and it's not a story that I'm going to literally tell. It's a perception of my own story, which each song is a perception. They're personal, but they're also interpretive. And there's I'm not going to say that everything's based on fact. I don't want to be too honest through my lyrics, but at the same time, I think the idea. I think a lot of people can connect with, or I'm hoping that a lot of people can connect with my songs, because they're a lot, like you mentioned earlier, they do reflect on things that you and I have both been through. Plenty of people have been through. everyone's been through trauma these past. You've been around. You've been around on this planet long enough now. You've been through some kind of traumatic experience, and
Right.
and how do we relate with that? How do we deal with that? You know, for me, it was I started drinking at an early age. I started drinking at 14, and I never thought I had a problem. And then 3 years ago, at the age of 51, during the pandemic, I things just got out of control. Like I was just binge drinking, out of
Yeah.
isolation, out of boredom,
Yep.
and then I totally was screwing up my life. And I thought, you know what, I got to take a break. So I took, for the first
Right.
time in my life, at 51, I took a 3-week break, and then I thought, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'll do another 3 weeks. So I did 6 weeks total, and then I thought, all right, that's pretty cool. I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to do 6 more weeks. And I ended up doing, so that it was 12 weeks, which is about 3 months. And that was it. Like there was this weird sort of, it was like a fog lifted, a fog that had been there all these years and I never knew. And it was like, so I had this new like level of clarity. And by the way, I just want to underscore, I don't have a problem with people drinking or doing, smoking pot or doing drugs or whatever.
Right.
Whatever choose your poison, but choose it wisely and try to keep yourself in balance. That's all I can say, because
Right.
there's a lot of shit that I wish I could remember. I have so many great stories that I can't even remember, I'm sure, half of them.
I could tell you folks, like when Mark and I when Mark and I would hang out in New York, it were some fun, interesting times. I could tell you, I remember seeing nights when Mark would walk in the middle of the road in New York City saying, I own this fucking town. So yeah, we had some interesting nights. There's nights we hung out and got messed up and drunk with Gary Newman from Gary Newman Band. And other various nights when we would literally walk into the dressing rooms of whatever band was playing at the Limelight and just be like, "Yeah, you guys are great, man. We love you. You're awesome, man. What's the name of your band?"
I think one of the best times we had was when we went to see Fear, and you and I decided we went to see Leave. Like we were just like, let's just go to the green room. We just went and knocked on the door.
Walk in.
And somebody says, "Who is it?" And we're just like, "It's Myke Hideous and Mark Steiner." And they opened the door and they let us in, not knowing who the fuck we were, but we were so confident, so they just let us in. And that was.
And then, in fact, I still have the photograph that you took with me next to Lee Ving. I love that picture. Classic picture.
The age before selfies.
That's right. So on that note, let's take another break, and we will come back and we will finish up with the interview. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in any of the merchandise that I sell, you can go to MykeHideous.com, just like the name of our program here, Finding the Truth with Myke Hideous. If you go to MykeHideous.com, you can get my book, which is called King of an Empire to the Shoes of a Misfit. It is about my years as a performer and a musician, and covers a range from 1988 to 2014. It also talks about my short but very successful point in time when I sang for the famous punk rock band known as the Misfits from Lodi, New Jersey. And you can also get my t-shirts, my horrible artwork, horror design, blankets, t-shirts, throw pillows, girls' dresses, so on and so forth, as well as my music, downloadable CDs. What else? I don't even. Just go to the damn website and check it out. So yeah, that's what I got. You can, and the most recent thing is the book. Hopefully I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have a whole bunch of new t-shirts up and ready to go for sale. And that's not just the music stuff from Empire Hideous, the band that I was in, but this whole other section of design of clothing that I have with my artwork designs on them, and I call it horrible artwork. And it's going to be all kinds of stuff like that. Old, creepy stuff,
in case anybody doesn't know my background, I kind of dabble in the occult. So all creepy, cool stuff like that. So yeah, folks, if you're interested in anything, go to MykeHideous.com. Click on the shop section and go down, and a couple other clicks and you're there. Thanks very much, guys.
All right, folks. Once again, you're listening to Finding the Truth with Myke Hideous. I am your host, Myke Hideous, and my co-host and producer, Professor Z, who's in the background today, and our guest we have on the show, Mr. Mark Steiner from Mark Steiner and His Problems, who is currently in Oslo, Norway. Are you in Oslo? Not right now, right?
Yeah, I am. I'm in Oslo.
You are,
right
okay.
now. Actually, I have a recording studio, so I'm in.
Fancy guy, huh?
Yeah, fancy guy. I mean, we got a little studio, so you can see the drum kit back there, and yeah, it's something I do on the side. I do a little producing as well, so and
Nice.
engineering occasionally, not very often.
I always thought the cabin. Are you at the cabin?
No, I was at the cabin earlier, but I came in. I thought I'd be more interesting to do this from the studio.
I see.
So and
okay.
also,
So
I'm
there's
going to go see I'm going to see an Iggy Pop tribute band tonight. Some friends of mine are playing, so I'm going to go see.
cool.
Yeah,
Cool. All right. So listen, let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Black Hole, the album from Mark Steiner and His Problems, as well as the song title, Black Hole. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the album and the song and the title of the album? Where did the title come from?
well, the title of the song, the title of the album,
Or the album,
Black
the
Hole.
song
The album
album.
comes through. Yeah, because it is. There's a song called Black Hole, and there's actually a few versions of that song that have been out there. So I'm going to confuse everybody right now. It's very confusing because there is the Nebula version, which was released last summer, which is a stripped down sort of a dark wave version that is just me playing baritone guitar, vocal, Pavel Single on violin, and Ingrid Holman on vocal. And the song was actually very inspired by events that she'd been through that I could also relate to, which directly involve personal trauma in life. Mm-hmm. So it was a very. I wrote the lyrics inspired by her story, and so we had recorded the full band version for the album, but because she and I and Pavel were doing some other shows, I just wanted to do something that was live, but wasn't. We didn't have to use backing tracks, really, you know. So I just made a new arrangement of it, and it's been doing really well as a single. So that's kind of a parallel project, that song Black Hole, and then now there's the album, which Black Hole, the band version, the original version, which I love. It's great. It's that's much more. It's more kind of post rock and a little bit sort of, I don't know, a little bit more galactic, and it's without being cheesy, but I just thought it'd be a great opener for the album. The album itself is about going on a journey, dealing with trauma and depression and sobriety, like a path towards sobriety, which is
sounds like my life every day.
Yeah, well, you know, and this is the thing is that, but a lot of people struggle with these things. They're right in the middle of it. They're caught in the middle of it, you know. And I don't know. I don't want to slam anybody who enjoys drinking or you know, getting high or whatever. Like that's fine. I mean, you know, it's your choice.
You're not preaching.
Yeah, but as long as nobody else gets hurt, and hopefully you don't overdo it for yourself, then great.
Of course.
I wasn't able to do that. I needed to take a break, and I needed to stop.
You walked the line, basically.
And that's what the record is about. And that's what Black Hole also reflects in a certain sense from a personal standpoint. We're actually doing a There's a guy named Nick Terry he's a British. There's a lot of expats here living here in Norway, in Oslo, and he's a producer and engineer. He's got a great little studio. He actually mastered the record. And I had a little chat with him a few months ago, and he offered to do a remix, like a totally different mix. So that's coming pretty soon. It's I think it's going to be more of a club kind of a mix, like a danceable mix, which is very different. And
now I have a question for you,
but I haven't heard it yet, so we'll see.
Is this going to be, when you say album, are you talking about like a CD, a physical CD? Because didn't you say you were going to do a 12-inch vinyl press of this as well?
Yeah, well, so Black Hole, the album itself, which is now available on all streaming services. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Tidal. It's on YouTube Music. It's on everything. So you can stream it. You can also pay for it on Apple Music and download it. You can buy it on Bandcamp.com. I have a page there with all of my releases, and you can get everything for like a bundle, all of my past stuff for like a pretty cheap price. But you can also buy physical merchandise, including some of my earlier albums and EPs. And Black Hole was launched in late January as a CD, as well as online digitally. And I've had a number of people asking me about being put out on vinyl. And I do love vinyl. So we're putting out a limited edition of 200 gatefold copies. And that's
right,
going to be
that's where I was getting confused, because I knew the album came out in January,
yeah.
But I wasn't sure if you were doing just a downloadable or a physical CD and a vinyl.
The CD is already out.
Okay, so the CD is done. Okay, all right.
The CD, but there's a really limited number of those. I pressed, there's like 100 available for sale. Okay, and probably sold about a third of them, maybe half at this point. I have to check the numbers. I still have some, like a bunch, but they're starting to go. I mean, it's like, one here, one there. And if I do a gig, most people, vinyl has had its big comeback, of course, but CDs are coming back again as well because of the size. And people want to have, it's funny. I've had people buy CDs, even though they won't play the CD, but it's out of respect. It's like, because they get a souvenir and then they can listen to it on Spotify. Do you know what I mean? Which is really great. Yep. And I actually encourage all of you listeners out there who appreciate music. I mean, anybody that you like, that you appreciate their music, it makes a really big difference if you can, even if you're just going to listen to you'll never listen to the vinyl or to the CD, just buy something, buy a t-shirt, buy it, whatever. It helps the band. It helps motivate even more than it does anything else. So, and I know, Myke, I know you've got a lot of stuff still that although things are starting to, I have 2 copies of your very first vinyl record, I realized.
Oh, really? It just sold out the other day.
Yeah,
it only took 35 years, but it sold out.
So I'm gonna keep one, but the other one on eBay and see what happens.
There you go. I have seen it sell for as high as 150 on eBay. But as I said, I just sold the last couple of records. So it's sold out, so to speak, the original Empire Hideous 12-inch, as well as the fourth project that we did, which was called Act 4, It's Just a Matter of Time, which was a cassette release. So it was only 400 copies of that. That just sold out too. That only took 30 years. But that's gone. The only thing I'm trying to get rid of now, I'm trying to sell the last remaining copies of This Evil on Earth, which was the second Empire Hideous release, and get rid of that. Again, I had all these cassettes when CDs were taking over in the late 80s, early 90s. Like, all these projects that I had ended up falling, into the closet because nobody was buying them anymore. So
Right.
anyway,
But
um,
just quick question. This Evil on Earth, that's the one that had Mr. Barnum on it, right?
that's right. My one of
Which,
my most famous songs.
yeah, which is
Toot toot.
brilliant. It's a great song. It's a really great song. Still, I mean, it carries
Thank you.
itself. So,
Thank you.
you know, but yeah,
Before we go on,
yeah,
for those of you who are Hideous fans or Spy Society fans, the album that I put out for Spy Society, at the end of the album, there were 3 bonus songs that were released as a new EP per se that I had recorded, I think in 2012 or 2011. I can't remember. Anyway, the Spy Society CD finally came out in 2014. One of the tracks on the album, which is called, what's it called? I don't even know my own song. Um, Where Have You Been? Where Have You Been? Um, and I had sent the copy to Mark in Norway, in which he did vocals, backing vocals on the song with me. So yeah, if you're interested in my CD of Spy Society '99 called Die Punk Die, Mark Steiner is actually a featured guest vocalist in one of the songs at the end with me. So there's a little fun fact for you right there. Carry on. You were saying.
no, I mean, but that's it's an amazing. I mean, in that sense, it's an amazing time in terms of music of being able to, I'm in my studio here in Oslo, Norway. You guys are out there, you're in Pennsylvania right now. And the fact that we're able to send files and record a song like
It's a
from
whole different world now, Mark. I
amazing.
mean, we didn't have this when we were younger,
No,
you
we
know?
didn't. We didn't.
And to top it off, when Mark was doing music video editing, he was using video decks, beta, super VHS, high 8. I mean, that's how you
3-4.
did editing back then. We didn't have iMovie or any of these programs like what's a Final Cut. These programs to use on the computer to edit your own video. It's like so simple these days. But back in the day when I was still doing music and Mark was starting out, there was not that option to do easy work. Like, you didn't have cell phones with cameras. Everything's changed. It's a whole different world for musicians.
Yeah, yeah. Because back then you could shoot stuff on video, but it looked like shit. It looked like
Yeah.
and then, but if you could shoot something on film, it had a whole different look, and it was a lot more. You can manipulate it.
And it was
But
much more expensive to edit.
God, it was insanely expensive.
That was the good thing about when Mark did my first documentary called To Build an Empire. Mark did all the editing at the studio where he was currently working with. What was his name?
Ken Ross, yeah,
Right, Ken Ross,
Yeah,
and that was down by the Twin Towers,
that's right.
if I remember correctly. So, yeah, Mark would do all this work, transferring the 16 millimeter to video and then going through the whole fucking thing and then editing it all. So, I mean, those days are gone for the most part. And now you just got this easy ability. Everything's digital on the computer. Far easier to make videos. I wish I had that opportunity back in the day for my band, because I would have had a little bit easier to try to get, to promote my band, but I just didn't have that luck.
There you go. I mean, there's the trade-off is that we have the technology now. The problem is that there's so much more competition. I mean,
yeah, everybody, everybody.
And there's no. When's the last time a new genre of music came out that is like really noteworthy or something different? It seems like the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years at least has been a lot of regurgitation of the same old stuff.
Absolutely.
Including like the kind of stuff that we do. So there's a lot of bands that are doing, I think it's really tricky right now to do something that's a bit different. because I think almost everything under the sun's been done, but it's all about the craft is about doing it well, and that's why it's
well
still
put.
worth. That's why it's still worth musicians. That's why I still keep doing music, because I'm just trying to master that craft, and put stuff out there. And I go to see bands and I support other people when I can. Not nearly as much as I used to, but
We're
that's
getting old.
Well, none of us are getting younger. So
No.
that's just how it is. So, but so the record's out, and there'll be a vinyl record out, and I'm hoping to do some dates in the States. I don't know if it'll be just me going over there, or if I go with my trio, or if we get enough hits and we actually can get some money together and get some stuff happening. When the vinyl record comes out, then I would love to bring a band over to New York, and maybe elsewhere. Who the hell knows? So
Right.
It's really but it's a matter of logistics and finances, and that's just,
of course, always a matter of
even if you have a label
finances.
behind you, you're faced with the same things. You're just maybe somebody's fronting the money for you. You just have even more debt. So
That's right.
That's
right.
So that's why at least I'm in control of that at this point. So we're not in control.
So once again, if people want to get merchandise from you, can they get it directly from your website?
If they go to my website, which is marksteinermusic.com.
marksteinermusic.com.
Right. That, all one word, that will take you to my website, and there's pretty much everything is listed there. It probably needs to be updated again, but it's
Who took that photo of you? Who took that photo of you? That is on both the cover of the album as well as the cover of the website, because it's a great shot.
That's a friend of mine named Tom Garrettson, who's he actually lives here in Norway as well. The funny thing is that we could have crossed paths years and years ago. He's a bit older than we are, but he's from he lived in the New York, North Jersey area.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the scene downtown, like the music scene, he was going to Studio 54 and that sort of thing. So
oh boy,
before my time. But he's a great guy. He's worked for years with Lydia Lunch, for example, and
oh boy, wow.
But now so he's a friend of mine. He's an artist, photographer, and he actually did an exhibition in my gallery a few years ago. I run a little art gallery.
Okay.
So he did a show there, and he took some photos, and it was 2 years ago, and it was just the idea was passing for the album. So
it's a beautiful picture. By the way, just for the hell of it, aside from all these songs that were on the cassette that I used to listen to all the time, I loved all these songs that were on here. But when you went in to do, I think it was the album Broken, pretty sure it was Broken. One of my favorite songs from that album is Cigarettes. Cigarettes or Cigarette?
Cigarettes. Yeah.
Cigarettes. That's one of my favorite songs on that entire album. And I always, if I'm making like a compilation, sometimes like in my car, I've got a car stereo that plays MP3s like on CDs. So every once in a while, if I do a mixtape or mixtape, listen to me. If I do like a mix CD or something, I will always throw that song on there. It just sort of makes the mood of whatever I'm listening to just as somber. But anyway, I really there was another song.
Which
Pardon?
Version? Which version from Broken? That version? Oh, there's actually
there. Cigarettes. From the Broken album, because I don't recall it from another. It was from another album.
Well, it was. I think it's on that tape, that cassette tape that you have.
Get out, really?
It might. I think there's a really early version of it, like a totally stripped down version. And then isn't it listed on there, or is that me just getting old, and it's not one of the songs listed on the track
It's not
listing.
listed on the tape. It's not listed on the tape. I gotta pull out the
I
whole
know
thing
it was
and look
one
at
of the
it.
earlier songs that I wrote that we did.
Well, there's
But,
that one, and then there's the other one from Broken, which I really. Shut up, please. Thank you. He's a
Drunk?
person outside. He's screaming. Um,
Drunk?
so there's another song from that album as well that I really liked, and I can't remember the title.
I think it's called
What?
Drunk? Drunk was a Pike Orion song. Catatonia. Catatonia.
No.
No,
Excuse me,
Catatonia.
I'm a little busy. Sorry.
I think it was
Anyhow,
Catatonia.
It might have been. Yeah, I can't remember the title. I just remember the song, the cigarette song, because I remember it's in the actual lyrics of the song. But
Right.
yeah. By the way, everyone, that's my bird, who is angry because he's not getting any airtime on the show.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of that song, "Cigarettes." That's like one of my favorite songs that you've ever done,
I don't
as
think
well as the songs from the tape. I mean, I used to love listening to that tape.
But you know what? Like you, Mike, as I put more new material out over the years, less and less of the old stuff. I mean, I don't think
Same thing here.
any of those songs in at least 10, maybe even close to 15 years at this point.
Well, you know what they say, as you progress as a writer, be it music, be it art, be it writing a book or something, you find yourself. And I'm not tooting my own horn when I say this. I think it's for anybody. You improve as a writer, an
Generally
artist.
speaking, I think some people might lose the plot, but you know.
Yes, you're quite right. You're quite right.
So
Some people might need to go back to phase one and just get that shit right the first time. But yeah, you're right. You get to a point where your old stuff, like if I listen to my first record, I cringe. I'm like, ugh, I did that. But that was the beginning of my career. Same with you.
I gotta say one thing about there's one song on there. And I know it's a bit of a sore spot, but that song "Letters from Puppets" is still. I think it's a great song, and I understand you're like the fact that it means it's a totally different time in your life.
Yeah.
But there's something about the song, like the song itself. Never mind that it's you and early Empire Hideous, but there's something about that song that has always grabbed me, and it's funny because it's still So it's that's really hard to do with your own music, is to be able to step away from it and be objective about it.
Right.
But I think it's a really, I think considering that was one of your earliest songs, especially with that band, and a very personal song, I think it's still, to me, it really resonates.
Well, thank you.
There we go.
But let's talk about more about
either. So
let's talk more about what you plan on doing now with the band. I mean, what's next for Pike Orion? What's next for Mark Steiner?
What's next? I'm working.
I mean, you said you're going to do shows. You said you're hoping to come out and do shows.
A few shows coming up with my trio with Pavel and Ingun. I'm trying to get some shows to do with the band. It's been really hard because we don't have. I mean, there's also something. It's when you're. I approached one festival and they loved the music, but they're like, yeah, but we're looking to book some younger artists, and I was like, okay, like that's so. That's just. Yeah, but I mean, that's just the reality. I'm not going to get all bent out of shape. I mean, it's for me. As long as I have some kind of an audience out there, I'd rather play to a. I mean, I've actually literally played to like a room with 2 people in it at one time.
Join the club.
I'd rather, but you know what? I'd rather play to a room full of just a handful of people who are there to like enjoy it and listen to it.
Provided they love it.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, but because you play like a festival, you could play like the biggest festival, but if people don't, they're just there to get wasted and have a good time with their friends. The
Yeah,
music, they're not.
most of the times.
There's maybe 10% of people who go to big festivals are really there to see the bands first and foremost.
If you had to pick, or shall I say, choose to answer a question that you would say my best performance was, or my favorite show was at, what would you say? Like, if you had to pick a place that was probably one of the better performances that you ever did, where would you say that would be or have been?
There's a few different shows. I think when I turned 40, I had a show here in Oslo at a place called Garage, and that was. I had a bunch of my favorite musicians here in Europe. They came in, like everybody flew in for that birthday party. We played a gig, and it was like we lost money. There weren't enough people in the audience, but like we had a great time. It was a really good gig. It's on YouTube. The whole thing. It's but those when I was working with mainly, I had 3 French musicians. I had a German guitar player.
Wow.
Pavel came up. My friend Thomas, a bass player from Copenhagen in Denmark, he came up. I mean, it was wild. It was a really great show. There's a lot of really great times. I mean, that was definitely. I think that was personally. It was just it was a really good performance and a really good chemistry. But I think the I almost shit my pants. This was such a fucking good gig. Was when I went to Australia in 2013 to perform at a Roland S. Howard tribute night. It was actually
what?
Roland S. Howard, the guitar player from the birthday party, early decade.
Okay.
Amazing guitar player. He died in 2009.
Oh.
I actually was lucky enough to play support for him in 2000.
I remember you telling me about that when we spoke prior.
So I got to meet him too. I mean, that was like that. That's when I really got to meet one of the big heroes of it was like that guy helped define what I want to do in terms of music and where I'm at today. It was lovely. I got to meet him. He was a lovely guy. I wouldn't say we were friends or anything, but we did meet on a few occasions. And but after he passed, and he just put out a record called Pop Crimes, and it was his second solo album. And so in 2013, there was a tribute gig that was going to be put together, and I got invited to go. Like I flew to Australia for a week. I was gone for 10 days. It takes 2 days to get down there. And because of the time difference,
kidding.
It took 1 day to get back up. So, but I was there for a week.
Wait a minute. Wait. Why did it take 1 day to get back?
Because of the time difference. So when you're flying west to east, you're going with time.
Right.
When you're flying in the opposite direction, you're going against time.
So weird, right?
Time, right? So
yeah, right. Yes, exactly. That's amazing.
But I got to do this show it was just one song, 2 nights in a row. But it was with Mick Harvey, who's best known for playing with both PJ Harvey and earlier with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. He was the backbone of that band for many, many years. So he was playing drums. Brian Henry Hooper of the Beast of Bourbon was playing bass. He's no longer around.
He died too?
He died a few years ago. I mean,
Just speak up a little bit more, Mark. I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah, there's a lot of. That's the thing. We're getting to a time where people don't always last.
Of course, yes. Circle of life.
So it was a real magical experience, and just being up there and playing the song "Silver Chain," which was written by Genevieve McGuckin, who was Roland Howard's partner in crime, and she was in the band as well playing. It was just like in this amazing moment, and that's actually up on YouTube, I have to say. So that there's a
Nice.
live take of that, and that was a really good moment.
That was one of your memorable moments in
Yeah,
music?
it was just like how the hell did I get here? You know, it's been a
Mm,
long ride, and that's already 11 years ago.
wow.
So, you know, but there's a lot of shows. I mean, there's a ton of shows. In fact, they're all listed on my website. You can go through my whole
Mm,
Rolodex of band history. So,
nice.
but yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't expect to be playing as much these days, but I'll do it when I can, and I'll
Hmm.
do it with who I can. And again, would love to do it with the guys with the band that I have here in Oslo. Um, but if they can't do it, then I can do it with Pavel and Ingrid. We've got shows coming up anyway. It's much easier in terms of budget, and we're just a
And those
trio.
shows are all in Norway?
We're doing actually 2 mini tours of Czech Republic in August
Okay.
because things are taking off there in a weird way. Like
Interesting.
Pavel is Czech,
How
so he
how
was in
how is your how is the response like when you go to another country? I know you've played Australia, you've played in Germany and other countries. You
yeah.
played in uh, Czech Republic, if I remember correctly. You did play Ukraine at one point too in the past. No,
No, I didn't. I almost did. I was
so
going to do Ukraine, but that was a long time ago.
okay, so all right, so you didn't play Ukraine. However, you did play other places. What's the response like? Like, I mean, you're a Norwegian American, and what's the response? Like, do you tend to find there's a difference in response from people in other countries, or do you always get a just a good vibe?
It's usually well received. I don't think I've had. I mean, I think the hardest gig I ever played was in Iceland at the Iceland Airways International Music Festival when a friend of mine let me play in her bar once. Actually, I played in her bar twice, but the first time was a lot of fun. It was just totally chaotic. But at least people were paying attention. And then I had to take a break because there was a big Russian guy who stepped up and insisted that he would take the microphone and sing the Russian song for Russian people. This is like this in 2003. So that was so it's like so
So
I
you
took a
just had to take a
I
break.
just
You
I
were
took
forced to take a break.
a little break and then I had a few shots of Icelandic vodka and I got completely blitzed. So not not my shiniest moment. But there was another gig where I played in her bar and it's jammed full of people, but nobody gave a shit. There were 2 people
Mm.
that were I could see were watching me perform with an electric guitar with a PA. I was on the PA, but like people were just drinking and they just didn't care. Like it was like because I wasn't on the schedule, so they were there to just get hammered. And but these 2 people really liked it. And they both came up to me afterwards, and one guy bought a CD. So there you go. You know, so it
Mhm.
actually for something that was like felt like an awful situation ended up being okay.
Do you think that today, I mean, obviously it's different from when we were younger. What do you think the difference is today for younger people that are getting into music and starting bands as opposed to when we were doing it back in the 90s?
Well, it's one thing is the communication is very different. I mean,
Mm.
I I'm quite sure that, and I'm very hopeful that there are young people out there doing young people, but like the kids these days. No, but that they're
The
doing like
kids these days.
because we were doing when we were doing like punk rock and goth and going to these shows and stuff back in the 80s and the 90s. A lot of that stuff most of it was really underground, at least up until 92, right? When punk rock broke, 91, 92, and
That
with
was the rise
grunge.
of Nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. That's when it all became, everything started becoming more commercial. Like that's when the labels started realizing they could make money off of anything. So they started signing underground stuff and sort of controlling that.
Mm.
There's always been a thriving independent scene. And the good thing about things like the Spotify is horrible in the sense that they don't pay the artists shit.
No,
But
terrible.
it's a really, but you know, if you can, you know, like I have stuff out there, I don't make any money off of it, but every now and then somebody will discover what I'm doing, and that could be through Spotify, it could be through Bandcamp. I think the real thing is you got to get out there and play. You know, go out there and play a gig, and you play live, and if you can tour, even better. But you know, to find your tribe, find your community, and that could be online, that could be in small little clubs all around, scattered around the world. It doesn't make a difference. You know, you just get out there and do it, but do your music. Rick Rubin's got this thing where he talks about basically, you know, if you should do it for yourself more than anybody else.
Right. I've always said that. Do it for yourself first.
I totally agree with that too. You know, like if you want to make music to try and make hit songs to make money, you know.
Yeah, don't get into it for that. Unless
like,
you're gonna like do something like Lady Gaga or Britney Spears or some crap like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, you know. But the thing is, I mean, I'll say at this point, I don't listen to that stuff, but I think
why not?
It just doesn't really speak to me, you know. I mean, but you can still recognize when someone's got like quality, even if it's a genre that I don't understand or like. There's always somebody who's really good at doing it, and there's most of it is shit. Most of what's out there in any given genre is just like half-ass or ripping off other people, or you know, like literally ripping
or too Hollywood, too Broadway play like.
Yeah,
I mean, like
yeah, I mean,
look at Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, she's a beautiful woman who plays guitar. She actually plays guitar,
right.
Writes her own music, so I can appreciate that. I hate her music. You know,
I couldn't tell you her music because I just don't.
Neither could I. I couldn't tell you one song.
If it were to pop up on the radio, just to me, it sounds like everything else that's on.
Exactly.
Like
exactly. From when Madonna like brought that style of top 40 music in especially for women. You know, you got Britney Spears, you had other female artists, and now the big one is Taylor Swift.
Right.
And it's all the same, in my personal opinion. Like you just said, it's all the same.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned those artists, because what they have in common is that they're really good at reinventing themselves and continuing, like for their audience, like reinventing themselves. And you know who really did that first?
Bowie.
Yep. I mean, you could say Elvis did it, but he didn't. He wasn't the one.
Not quite.
He was being manipulated and used, and that was a sad story. Bowie was a master.
Bowie was a chameleon.
Yep, and that's exactly where Madonna got her idea on how to approach doing music and reinvent yourself, and that's become a thing. And some people are really good at that, and that's a craft in itself. I'm not gonna like. Again, I just like that kind. Their music doesn't interest me, so I'm not even gonna like. I'm not interested anymore in criticizing stuff that just doesn't speak to me. I'd rather be focused on. I mean, I don't need to sound like all new agey or anything, but I've just gotten to a point in my life where I just don't like stuff that brings me down. I just don't give a shit. You know, I'd rather if I'm down, if I'm depressed or I'm pissed off, I'll listen to music that speaks to me, that does that delivers on that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I keep doing it myself. I'm just to exercise my demons, and maybe somebody out there can relate to something that I've done musically or lyrically or both.
Right.
It's the best I can hope for.
Well, that's quite interesting to say the very least. Before we start wrapping it up here, did you want to talk about your sobriety and what it's done for you, if anything at all?
I regret that I didn't experience or have the level of clarity that I have right now. I wish I'd made more of an effort about 20 years ago. because I would remember so much more about, even back when we're like talking about those times when you and I met and hanging out in New York City. I mean, I was wasted a lot of the time. Like maybe
Yes, I know.
not shit-faced in the beginning, but it would end up that way. I mean, I
Right.
remember like I remember going to see Bauhaus, a reunion show, and I remember that I think Peter Murphy stepped on my foot, like he was wearing high heels, and this was at some venue over on, but I can hardly remember. It's really fuzzy, you know. I remember going to see Curve, who I was a huge fan of theirs.
I remember
Loved
Curve, yeah.
And then I waited until after show to say hello, and there were some people, and getting autographs, and I just wanted to say hi to her. But I was so fucking drunk and probably on whiskey, and I think I blacked out. Like, I don't remember what I said to her. I probably scared the shit out of her. You know what I mean? Which is really unfortunate, and because that's not me. That was a side of me that was like just really unhappy with myself.
Mark had
release, so
back in the day. I know you don't, right? Back in the day, there was a point in my career when I was trying to get into doing. I was trying to get into acting, and I was doing a lot of extra work. And in fact, Susan Mitchell had got me my first scene, if you will, as an extra in a clip and an episode that came out. I forget what it was called, but I had my 3 seconds of glory on TV. Anyway, one day Mark calls me up. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" I'm like, "Nothing. I didn't have a job. I didn't do anything. I did nothing." So he goes to me, "You want to be in a music video for Nina, the one who did 99 Luft balloons?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." He's like, "All right, well, be here at 7 a.m. I'm like, "What?" So I had to show up at CBGB's at 7 a.m. and we shot this music video for Nina. And I forget what song it was, but yeah, Mark and I were there. I don't even think you see us in the music video.
No, I remember. I remember seeing the videos out there, but I can't remember the song. If you Google Nina CBGB, I think it pops up. But
the other thing is, you had taken a picture of the two of us, her and I together. Yeah. And to this day, I was never able to open that file. If you ever come across that, I would love to.
Oh yeah, no, I think I have.
If you ever find it, send it to me. I'd love to have that picture.
I think I have a print of it because I think it was originally a 35 millimeter camera.
Yeah, it was a regular photograph. It wasn't taken on a cell phone or anything. I don't think cell phones were even invented that day. But anyway, I was just going to say, Mark was the one who calls me. I was like, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow? Meet me at CBGB's at 7 a.m. I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "I don't even wake up until 11.
That's the time when I'd be used to leaving.
Exactly. Yeah. But so yeah, Mark and I, we experienced some very, very interesting times within New York City from about 94 onward. And especially from about 95 onward, from 96 onward, because that's when I started working at the Aquarian Weekly Arts and Entertainment newspaper. And I used to get on assignment to review a show. And if for example, if we went to like the Hammerstein Ballroom, where we went to go see the Joey Ramone birthday after Joey Ramone had died. So I took Mark as my guest to go see, a bunch of bands played. Blondie played, The Damned played. And so, usually after the show, we would go down into the dressing rooms and we would speak to these people. And if you remember that night we went down, we met Dave Vanian from The Damned, as well as Patricia Morrison, who was also in The Damned at the time, but also played with the Mission UK, with Sisters of Mercy, the Gun Club. Was it the Gun Club? Yeah, Gun Club, right?
But that was that at Coney Island High.
No, that was The Damned. That was The Damned. When we saw the Joey Ramone birthday party. We
Yeah.
did go backstage for that as well, and you probably don't remember, but I
I
do.
don't remember.
Yeah, Dave Vanian was there with Patricia Morrison, and we went up then and we were talking to them. But the night at Coney Island High for the Dam, that was a major thing. Uh, uh, in fact, I was dating Vicky at the time, who had her camera, and the pictures of you and I and Dave Vanian speaking, all having a conversation was just amazing. The night we met Gary Newman or saw Gary Newman at the Irving Plaza, and then afterwards went to the after party at the Bank in New York City, and we were hanging out downstairs where they had Gary Newman and his band. And if you remember, after we had like an hour-long conversation with Gary Newman, we sat down at the table with the band, and they were passing around joints as big as his pen. And as we sat at the table, we would get a joint, take a hit, pass it, and then another one would be coming. It was like an assembly line. So yeah, we got really ripped that night. I could tell you stories from that, but we'd have to do another show because it's far too long. But yeah, we experienced some things that took place back then in New York City that, in my personal opinion, I don't even think occur anymore. I think the club scene has died. I think music has died. The underground music scene has died. I think the shit hit the fan when the China virus took over and like made everybody in the world scared.
Yeah. Well,
that's my opinion.
That's what my hope is that like I was saying before, the kids these days, they have their ways of, they're probably doing stuff that none of us know anything about. There's scenes out there, and good on them. And I hope that they whatever, just to have a release, because that's what rock and roll is all about, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
So, but just to add one more thing about that, when we met Dave Vanian and Patricia Morrison, and that was at Coney Island High, and Congo Norvell had opened up.
Congo.
Yeah,
Kid Congo. Now, Kid Congo, for those of you who don't know, Kid Congo played in the Gun Club. He played with Nick Cave, right?
Yep.
And who else? And the Cramps, right? So yeah, look him up. Mark played with Kid Congo.
Yeah, I did. I actually opened up for him once. He's a lovely guy. But that was the first time I met him. But what I wanted to share was when we met Patricia Morrison there, because I remember being completely just like when she did that this Corrosion video with
Sisters of Mercy.
It was just like she was like this iconic goddess of like the whole goth scene.
Of goth, yeah.
And then there she was, and she turns and looks at me, and she puts out her hand. She says, "Hello, I'm Patricia." And I shook her hand and I said, I know,
duh.
That's all I said.
What about?
And then I turned red as a beet, and I walked away.
What about when we met Michael Girard? If I remember correctly, did you not meet him through one of the acoustic gigs that I did at the Mission Club?
No, actually, the reason I met Michael Girard.
Okay, so hang on 1 second. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who don't know who Michael Girard is, Michael Girard is from a famous band called the Swans, like an experimental type band. And the first time I ever met him when he was at a gig of mine, I did an acoustic gig at this place called the Mission Club, which has since burnt down, and the owner since unfortunately died. Nevertheless, not in the same fire or anything like that. Nevertheless, Michael was there. Mark knew Michael Girard, and I think you even had a friendship going on with him at some point.
Yeah, but that actually had to do with, you sent me down to do an interview with Michael Girard at Bowery Ballroom.
That's right. That's right.
His band Angels of Light, and I went to do the interview with him, and then it was just a bit too chaotic. So he gave me his phone number, and then he said, "Well, why don't we do it over the phone instead?" So I did that, and then I did a second interview with him for a New York magazine that I can't quite remember what it's called now, because I don't think it's certainly not around anymore.
Speak up.
But you had hooked me up with like doing some photo journalism, and that was how I met him. And then after we met a few times, that I realized that I knew his girlfriend, who he ended up marrying, Siobhan from the band Gunga Din, who was a friend of mine, another great band from New York from the 90s. And that's how I got to be friends with him. I mean, I'm still friends with him. So
remember the night you called me up? You're like, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend? You want to go to a party at Michael Girard's house or apartment?" I'm like, "Yeah." We go there and we met Jim Fetus or
That's
Jim
right.
Thirlwell from the band Fetus,
Right.
and I'll never forget. I had met Jim Thirlwell the night the Swans played their last show at Irving Plaza. And I went backstage. I had a VIP to get backstage, and I see Jim Thirlwell there. Now, this is a guy whose the name of his band was Scraping Fetus Off the Wheel. That was the name of his band. Just a weird guy. Like, he would play CBGBs, a one-man band with pig heads on stakes at his gig. That's where I got the idea to do my show with pig heads. But anyway, so I meet Jim Thirlwell, and he's backstage at the Swans concert. And I walked up to him after having interviewed Michael Girard. I walk up to Jim and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing? My name's Myke Hideous. I'm a journalist for the Aquarium Weekly. I was wondering if I could do an interview for you or of you." And he just did this. No. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, never mind." So the night Mark brought me to this party at Michael's house, everybody was there. I think Kid Congo was there. Michael's wife at the time, that was in the band, the keyboardist. Anyway, she was there. And Jim Thirlwell was there. And again, I approached him like, "Hey, you remember me? I met you at Irving Plaza backstage at the Swans concert." And again, he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, okay, good. Nice meeting you. Goodbye."
Yeah, he's a pretty eccentric guy. I don't know him personally. I've met him a few times over the years, but you know what? I'll say one thing though is that he's still at it. He's still doing it. He's doing
well. He does. He does when the show was on called The Venture Brothers, who was created by Eric Hammer from Requiem in White.
Yep.
The score is done by Jim Fetus or Jim Thirlwell.
Yep.
And I've got both of the CDs, which are phenomenal CDs. You're right. He's still at it. He's more of like an orchestrator, like a conductor than anything. When he gets these big bands together with horns and strings and drums and blah, blah, blah. And he conducts this whole orchestra.
Yeah.
I think he's still with Lydia Lunch too.
No. They as a couple. No,
they're gone. They're not together.
That's last century.
Oh, is it? There you go, folks. That just goes to show you how out of step I am.
But but those are people who are still at it, and that's great. Like that's the thing. I mean, they're older than us, and they're still at it. And Gary Newman is still at it, like full on.
Yep.
He's great. Like what? Yeah. He's amazing. It's just. That's good. That's in that sense. I still have some hope. I mean, not for myself as hitting it big, but it's kind of like it's inspiring to see people still doing it because
it sure is. Because I certainly can't do it. And on that note, I just wanted to say, Mark, it's been great having you on. Professor Z, did you want to ask anything to Mark or say anything to Mark?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I think
the old days is right.
Yeah. A lot of reminiscing here, but yeah.
I am
so much.
By the time this airs, it'll be too late. But tomorrow I'm actually doing a special appearance with a friend of mine's band, October North.
Yep.
The interview you saw
Yep.
from the last episode. They're playing for this Gothic festival called Dark Forces. It's in
Yep.
Parsippany, New Jersey, and so I'm actually going to be doing I'm going to sing one song, which is going to be released. It's a song called "The Ages," and without going into a long, drawn-out story, it's October North is releasing it. They re-recorded the music, my vocals, so it's coming out under the name October North in May. And I'm actually going to be doing the song with them. I'm going to sing the song tomorrow at the convention. But that's a whole other story. In any event, Mark, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to to spend with me here and talk about not only what's going on with your band, Mark Steiner and His Problems, but as well as our past. Is he there?
It's always, it's a pleasure talking to you.
There you are.
I mean, we've known each other a long time, and you're a brother to me. So appreciate this very much, and it's I do like the show as well. I think it's great that you guys are doing it. And Professor Z, thanks so much for even though you pretty quiet for this one, but that's all good. I appreciate the.
He doesn't say much when I do an interview.
No, I realized that, but yeah, but it's all good. But so thanks for everything. Appreciate it, guys. So thanks to everybody out there who's bothered watching all of this and listening to us, or me in particular, again. So.
Well, I hope you pick up some new fans from this, and maybe they'll get their hands on your CD or CDs, and maybe, who knows, if they're listening to this in Europe, they might even come see you play. So there you go, Mark. Thank you so much. Say again.
Thank you. Or maybe
you're quite welcome.
When I come to visit. Yeah,
maybe.
So.
One way or another, they'll hopefully they'll sign up, and we'll put all your information up. Your links for the website and social media. We'll put them all up for the interview when it gets posted. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, folks. So you've heard it here, Mark Steiner and His Problems. Don't hear on Finding the Truth with Myke Hideous. Thank you so much for
listening.
Where does your universe start and end? Where does your past meet the present? Will it ever end? Was it a tragedy? They tried to steal your soul. Was it mind over matter when they seized control? There's a black hole tearing at the sun.
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 There's a black hole.
Make it all undone. Strange calamity when they took you in. They pointed with their fingers like you committed a sin.
You gave your trust. They took away your freedom. Locked you up, left you to rot in that dark prison.
There's a black hole tearing at the sun.
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 There's a black hole, make it all undone. Lost in a nebula, they left you for blind. Somehow you found the key, made it back outside. Like a comet, you made your way back around. Your head up in the clouds, your feet down on the ground.
There's a black hole tearing at the sun.
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 There's a black hole tearing at the sun.